Before the crash, Jerome Washington's alarm buzzed at 4:30 a.m., just like every morning for the past 3 years. At 34, his body already ached like a man 20 years older, the result of working 3 jobs to support his 8-year-old daughter Maya, who had cerebral palsy. Job 1, warehouse loader from 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. Job 2, delivery driver from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Job 3, night janitor at an office building from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Between jobs, he'd rush home to check on Maya, help with her physical therapy exercises, and make sure she had everything she needed. "Daddy, why do you work so much?" Maya had asked him the night before, her small hand reaching for his as he tucked her into bed. "So you can have everything you need, baby girl," Jerome had whispered, kissing her forehead. "Daddy's gonna make sure you're always taken care of." Maya's medical bills consumed most of Jerome's income, her wheelchair, medications, and therapy sessions weren't fully covered by their basic insurance. Jer drove a 15-year-old Honda Civic with 200,000 miles on it, not because he wanted to, but because it was all he could afford. On the morning of March 15th, Jerome was driving between jobs, exhausted but determined. He was thinking about Maya's upcoming surgery, $15,000 that insurance wouldn't cover, when everything changed in an instant. The collision, the intersection of Oak Street and Memorial Drive, was busy at 1:45 p.m. Jerome sat at the red light, running numbers in his head. If he picked up extra weekend shifts at the warehouse, maybe took on more delivery routes, he might be able to save enough for Maya's surgery in 8 months. The light turned green. Jerome pressed the accelerator, checking his watch. He had 15 minutes to get to his delivery job. He never saw the black BMW coming. Richard Blackstone, 52, CEO of Blackstone Development, was late for a golf meeting with city council members. He'd had 3 martinis at lunch and was texting his assistant about rescheduling his afternoon while doing 65 miles per hour in a 35 miles per hour zone. He ran the red light at full speed. The impact sent Jerome's Honda spinning across the intersection. The sound of crushing metal and shattering glass echoed through the busy street as the BMW T-boned the driver's side of Jerome's car. When the paramedics arrived, Jerome was unconscious, trapped in the wreckage. It took them 45 minutes to extract him from the mangled vehicle. The aftermath: Jerome woke up in County General Hospital 3 days later. His left leg was shattered, requiring multiple surgeries and metal pins. 3 ribs were broken. His shoulder was dislocated, but the worst injury was to his back. 2 herniated discs that would require surgery and months of rehabilitation. "Mr. Washington," Dr. Martinez explained gently, "you're going to need extensive physical therapy. The back injury is serious. You may never be able to do physical labor again." The words hit Jerome harder than the car had. No physical labor meant no warehouse job, no delivery driving, no janitorial work, no income. "How long before I can work?" Jerome asked. "Full recovery. Best case scenario, 6 to 8 months. "But Mr. Washington, you need to understand. Your body has been through severe trauma. You may need to consider a different type of work." Jerome thought about Maya, at home with his elderly mother, who was barely managing on her Social Security check. He thought about the medical bills that were already piling up. He thought about Maya's upcoming surgery. When the insurance adjuster from Blackstone's company visited, Jerome was still heavily medicated. "Mr. Washington, we're prepared to offer you $15,000 to settle this matter quickly," the adjuster said, placing papers in front of Jerome. "This will cover your immediate medical expenses, and you won't have to worry about legal fees or lengthy court proceedings." Through his pain medication haze, Jerome almost signed. $15,000 seemed like more money than he'd ever seen at once. But something his father had told him years ago echoed in his mind. Son, when someone's in a hurry to give you something, it usually means it's worth a lot more. I need time to think, Jerome said. Finding a lawyer. Getting a personal injury lawyer when you're poor isn't easy. Jerome called dozens of law firms from his hospital bed. The big firms wouldn't take his case without a retainer he couldn't afford. The smaller firms said his case wasn't worth enough to pursue. Finally, Jerome found Maria Santos, a solo practitioner who worked out of a small office above a barbershop. Maria had grown up poor herself and specialized in personal injury cases for people who couldn't afford traditional lawyers. Jerome, Maria said during their first meeting, I'm going to be honest with you. This is going to be a fight. Richard Blackstone has money, power, and connections. His insurance company has a team of lawyers whose job is to pay you as little as possible. But you have something they don't expect. What's that? The truth. And a personal injury lawyer who's not afraid to fight. Maria explained how personal injury law worked. They would need to prove Blackstone was negligent, document all of Jerome's injuries and expenses, and fight for compensation that would actually cover his losses, medical bills, lost wages, pain and suffering, and future care needs. The real value of your case is probably closer to $500,000, Maria explained. Maybe more, depending on your long-term prognosis. Jerome nearly choked. $500,000? You've lost your ability to earn a living, Jerome. You'll need ongoing medical care. Your daughter depends on you. Personal injury law exists to make you whole again, not to make insurance companies richer. The investigation, building Jerome's personal injury case, required extensive investigation. Maria hired a private investigator, an accident reconstruction expert, and gathered witness statements from the scene. What they discovered made the case stronger and more dangerous. Richard Blackstone had 2 previous DUI arrests that were mysteriously dismissed. His blood alcohol level at the scene was 0.12, well above the legal limit. But the responding officer had failed to properly administer the breathalyzer test. Security camera footage from nearby businesses showed Blackstone's BMW clearly running the red light. But when Maria tried to access the police report, she found discrepancies. Officer Michael Torres, who responded to the scene, had written that the cause of the accident was unclear, and that both drivers may have been at fault. This is odd, Maria told Jerome. With this much evidence of Blackstone's guilt, why would the police report be so vague? They got their answer when Maria's investigator discovered that Officer Torres's brother worked security for Blackstone Development, and that Torres himself had received several consulting payments from Blackstone's company over the past 2 years. The arrest. Just when Jerome thought his personal injury case was getting stronger, everything went wrong. 6 weeks after the accident, police showed up at Jerome's apartment with a warrant. The charges: insurance fraud and filing a false police report. Jerome Washington, you're under arrest, Officer Torres said, the same cop who had filed the misleading accident report. According to the charges, Jerome had allegedly exaggerated his injuries and conspired with his lawyer to inflate his medical expenses. The evidence? An anonymous tip claiming Jerome had been seen walking normally and lifting heavy objects, despite claiming to be disabled. Jerome's bail was set at $50,000, money he didn't have. He sat in county jail for 3 days before Maria could arrange for a bail bondsman to release him. This is retaliation, Maria explained to Jerome after his release. Blackstone's people are trying to discredit you before we get to court. It's a common tactic. If they can make you look like a criminal, the jury won't sympathize with your personal injury claim. Fighting on 2 fronts. Now, Jerome was fighting 2 legal battles. his personal injury lawsuit against Blackstone, and criminal charges that could send him to prison. The stress was overwhelming, especially with Maya asking why Daddy had to go to court so much. The criminal case was clearly fabricated. The anonymous tip came from a phone number registered to a company owned by Blackstone's brother-in-law. The photos supposedly showing Jerome walking normally were taken when he was having a good day during physical therapy, something that's completely normal for people with back injuries. But fighting both cases was expensive. Maria was working pro bono on the personal injury case, but Jerome needed a criminal defense attorney too. Every day in legal limbo meant more medical bills, more missed work, and less money for Maya's needs. Jerome's mother, who was watching Maya, started having health problems from the stress. Maya's schoolwork suffered as she worried about her father. The family was falling apart. Maybe I should just take their settlement offer, Jerome told Maria during one of his lowest moments. This is destroying my family. Jerome, if you take that $15,000 settlement, you'll lose everything. Your medical bills alone are already over $50,000. Without proper compensation, you'll go bankrupt, lose your apartment, and Maya won't get the care she needs. This is exactly what they're counting on, that you'll give up. The truth emerges. The breakthrough in Jerome's case came from an unexpected source. Amanda Rivera, a server at the restaurant where Blackstone had been drinking before the accident, came forward with information that changed everything. Amanda had been too scared to speak up initially. She was an undocumented immigrant and feared deportation. But watching the news coverage of Jerome's R made her angry enough to risk everything. Mr. Blackstone was drunk, Amanda told Maria. Really drunk. He was bragging to his friends about how his lawyers could make any problem disappear. He said, and I remember this exactly, "Watch how fast we turn this into the other guy's fault. Money talks, and poor people don't." Amanda had recorded the conversation on her phone, hoping to protect herself if Blackstone's group caused trouble at the restaurant. The recording was devastating evidence of consciousness of guilt and conspiracy. But the evidence came with a price. Within days of Amanda coming forward, she was arrested by ICE agents. Her phone was confiscated. Maria had to fight to get the recording admitted as evidence while also finding Amanda an immigration lawyer. Media attention. The story of Jerome Washington, a poor father fighting a wealthy businessman who tried to frame him for insurance fraud, began attracting media attention. Local news stations picked up the story. Social media campaigns started with #JusticeForJerome. The attention helped Jerome's case but also made life harder. Reporters camped outside his apartment. Maya couldn't play outside without photographers taking pictures. Jerome received threatening phone calls and letters, but the media attention also brought support. A local church raised money for Maya's surgery. Physical therapists volunteered to help with Jerome's rehabilitation. Other families who had been victimized by similar tactics reached out to share their stories. Most importantly, the publicity put pressure on the district attorney's office to properly investigate the criminal charges against Jerome. When DA Patricia Williams reviewed the evidence, she was appalled. "These charges are completely baseless," DA Williams announced at a press conference. "Not only are we dropping all charges against Mr. Washington, but we're opening a criminal investigation into possible witness intimidation and corruption in this case." The civil trial begins. Jerome's personal injury trial began on a rainy Monday morning in October, 7 months after the accident. The courthouse was packed with supporters, media, and curious observers who had followed the story. Blackstone's legal team was led by Hamilton, Cross, and Associates, one of the most expensive law firms in the city. They had 4 lawyers, 2 paralegals, and unlimited resources. Maria Santos stood alone at the plaintiff's table with Jerome beside her. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Maria began in her opening statement. "This case is about more than a car accident. It's about a system that tries to silence the poor and protect the powerful. Jerome Washington was nearly killed by a drunk driver, and instead of taking responsibility, that driver used his wealth and influence to try to destroy Jerome's life." Blackstone's lead attorney, Jonathan Cross, painted a different picture. "Mr. Washington is trying to... He's exaggerated his injuries, inflated his expenses, and even resorted to criminal fraud to support his excessive demands. The first week of testimony was technical, accident reconstruction experts, medical testimony about Jerome's injuries, economic analysis of his lost wages. But the human story emerged through Jerome's own testimony. Jerome takes the stand. 'Mr. Washington, tell the jury about your life before the accident,' Maria prompted. Jerome described his routine. 3 jobs, constant exhaustion, but also pride in being able to support Maya. He talked about getting up at 4:30 a.m. and falling asleep at 2:30 a.m., only to start again 4 hours later. 'I wasn't living,' Jerome said quietly. 'I was surviving, but it was worth it because Maya needed me to be strong.' He described the accident from his perspective, sitting at the red light, thinking about Maya's surgery, then waking up in the hospital, unable to move. 'What's the hardest part about your injuries?' Maria asked. Jerome's voice broke. 'Not being able to pick up my daughter. Maya has cerebral palsy, and sometimes she needs help getting around. Before the accident, I could carry her wherever she needed to go. Now, some days I can barely carry myself.' The cross-examination was brutal. Jonathan Cross questioned every aspect of Jerome's story, implied he was faking his pain levels, and suggested his financial problems were due to poor choices rather than the accident. 'Isn't it true, Mr. Washington, that you were already behind on bills before this accident?' 'Yes.' 'And isn't it true that this lawsuit represents more money than you've ever earned in your entire life?' 'Yes.' 'So you have a strong financial incentive to exaggerate your injuries, don't you?' Jerome looked directly at the lawyer, then at the jury. 'Sir, I would give back every penny if I could have my old life back. I didn't want to be rich. I just wanted to take care of my daughter.' The defense crumbles. The defense's case began to fall apart when Amanda Rivera's recording was played in court. Hearing Blackstone's voice bragging about making the accident the other guy's fault and dismissing poor people sent a visible shock through the jury. Then Maria called Officer Torres to the stand. Under oath and facing perjury charges, Torres admitted to filing false reports and accepting money from Blackstone's company. 'Did you deliberately misrepresent the facts of this accident in your police report?' Maria asked. 'Yes.' 'Why?' Torres looked down. 'Mr. Blackstone's people said they would make sure I got promoted if I helped them out. They said it was just about insurance money, that nobody would really get hurt.' The final blow came when Maria presented evidence that Blackstone's insurance company had systematically targeted poor and minority accident victims with low-ball settlements while using intimidation tactics against those who refused. This wasn't just about one accident, Maria told the jury in her closing argument. This was about a system designed to prey on the vulnerable. Jerome Washington had the courage to stand up and say no to that system, even when it cost him everything. The verdict. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Jerome spent that time in prayer, surrounded by his community, trying to prepare for either outcome. Maya, now understanding more about what was happening, held her father's hand and told him, "Daddy, you're the strongest person I know." When the jury returned, The foreman stood with a piece of paper that would determine Jerome's future. On the question of liability, we find the defendant, Richard Blackstone, fully responsible for the accident that injured Jerome Washington. Relief washed over Jerome, but the real question was damages. On the question of compensatory damages, we award the plaintiff, Jerome Washington, the sum of $850,000. The courtroom erupted in cheers and tears. Jerome hugged Maria, then turned to see Maya in the gallery, clapping her hands with pure joy. But the jury wasn't finished. On the question of punitive damages, given the defendant's deliberate attempts to cover up his responsibility and intimidate the plaintiff, we award an additional $2.1 million. Jerome nearly collapsed. Nearly $3 million. Enough to pay for Maya's surgery, cover his medical expenses, replace his lost income, and provide security for his daughter's future. The aftermath. The victory made national news. Jerome Washington became a symbol of how ordinary people could fight back against powerful interests and win. Speaking requests poured in. Book deals were offered. But Jerome wasn't interested in fame. He used the settlement money carefully, $200,000 for Maya's surgery and ongoing medical care, $150,000 to pay off medical bills and debts, $300,000 invested in a trust fund for Maya's future, $100,000 to start a small business, a food truck that could accommodate his physical limitations, $50,000 donated to legal aid organizations helping other families fight similar battles. The remainder was invested conservatively to provide steady income for their family. The ripple effect. Jerome's case had consequences far beyond his personal victory. Officer Torres was fired and charged with corruption. The district attorney's office opened investigations into other suspicious accident reports. Blackstone's insurance company faced federal scrutiny for its targeting of minority communities. Richard Blackstone himself faced criminal charges for drunk driving, witness intimidation, and conspiracy. His company lost several major city contracts when the extent of his corruption became public. Most importantly, Jerome's case inspired other families to fight back against similar injustices. Maria Santos's law practice grew as more people found the courage to challenge powerful interests. New purpose. A year after the accident, Jerome stood before a community college class of paralegal students, sharing his story. Personal injury law isn't just about money, Jerome explained. It's about accountability. It's about making sure that when someone hurts you through their negligence or deliberate actions, they have to take responsibility. Jerome had found his new calling as a community advocate, helping other families navigate the legal system. His food truck business was thriving, and Maya's surgery had been successful. She was walking better than ever. The accident took away my old life, Jerome told the students. But fighting for justice gave me a new one. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the doorway to your purpose. Maya's dream. On a sunny Saturday morning, Jerome watched Maya play with other children at a community center that had been built with part of the settlement money. She was running and laughing, her leg braces barely slowing her down. "Daddy," Maya said, running up to him, "when I grow up, I want to be a lawyer like Miss Maria." "Why's that, baby girl?" "Because lawyers help people who need help, and you taught me that helping people is the most important thing you can do." Jerome hugged his daughter, thinking about how far they'd come. The accident had nearly destroyed their lives, but their fight for justice had ultimately saved them and helped others too. Epilogue. Justice served. 3 years after the accident, Jerome received an invitation to speak at the State Bar Association's annual conference about personal injury law and access to justice. As he prepared his remarks, he reflected on everything that had happened. The system had tried to crush him. A poor black man with no power, no connections, and no resources except his determination to seek justice. They had counted on him being too afraid, too poor, or too tired to fight back. They had underestimated the power of truth, the strength of community support, and the courage that comes from fighting for something bigger than yourself. Personal injury law exists for a reason, Jerome told the assembled lawyers. It's not about making lawyers rich or encouraging frivolous lawsuits. It's about making sure that everyone, rich or poor, powerful or powerless, is held accountable for their actions. He paused, looking out at the audience of successful attorneys. When I was lying in that hospital bed, broken, I almost gave up. I almost took their $15,000 settlement and walked away. But my daughter needed me to be stronger than my circumstances. She needed me to fight. Every client you represent is someone's father, mother, son, or daughter. They come to you because they've been hurt, not just physically, but in every way that matters. Your job isn't just to win cases. It's to restore dignity, demand accountability, and prove that justice isn't just for those who can afford it. Jerome concluded with the words that had become his motto: "Justice delayed is justice denied, but justice fought for is justice earned." And sometimes, when you fight for justice, you discover that you're not just healing yourself, you're helping heal the world. As the lawyers stood to applaud, Jerome thought about Maya, now 11 years old and thriving in school, dreaming of becoming a lawyer herself. The accident had taken so much from them, but their fight for justice had given them something even more valuable: proof that ordinary people could stand up to extraordinary power and win. The system wasn't perfect. There were still battles to fight, still families to help, still injustices to confront. But Jerome Washington had learned something that no amount of money could buy. When you fight for what's right, you discover strength you never knew you had. And sometimes that strength is enough to change everything. They thought being poor meant being powerless. They forgot that sometimes the most powerful thing in the world is someone who has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Jerome Washington. The end.